Hello friends, here's something new I can share with you. Wet blending acrylic lacquer paints. Yes, it's difficult, yes, it's stupid to even think about doing this, but it turned out great. Well, at least it's good enough that I'm not crying myself to sleep now. Now why? Well, I really didn't like something about the airbrush finish. I mean, the color's beautiful and it's nice and smooth, but it just doesn't feel right to me. I desperately wanted more texture and visual interest. So here's how it looks on the airbrush side, and here's a quick look at this side after my test of the plan. Yes, I like it enough to feel that it's not a complete ruin, so let's run with it. Now just before we start, I'd like to give you a heads up, and yeah, this is huge. The first ever official Maschinen Krieger book in English is now available for pre-order as a 40th anniversary limited edition. Single print run, so please don't miss out. Pre-order secures your copy. Go to paintonplastic.com and get yours. Links in the description, and yes, this is real. Okay, now setting up for the wet blending, I've got my paint range out that I've used for the base colors on this model. So that's Mr. Color Yellow, Off-White, and Cowling Color. I've topped up just a little self-leveling thinner. I just need a very thin reactivation in the dish. And this is a size 10 Sable. And it's a home brand from Sekaido. Those of you into oil painting, it's called a shader, which is something we could use for, say, filtering, glazing, and so on. But so long as it's a wide, flat, and reasonably soft bristle brush, it'll be more than fine. You can see I've let some paint in it from before because the color mixing works for me. Now please think of this, if you're thinking along with me, think of it as each time then that I add the space white, it will brighten up this highlight color. And interestingly, because it's got some of the original cowling color, that's the very, very dark black blue. Look how bright that is. So you see what I mean? It looks kind of a little muddy perhaps on our working paper, but no, the highlight effect is actually quite pronounced. Now this is not so much the wet blending. We'll get to that. This was pre-highlight, was the way I was thinking about this in my mind. So I'm working around the model and highlighting, but also see those back areas there? Thinking of that as a kind of a pre-burnt effect, and I'm marking out where I would like some of this coloration to be seen on the model. And yes, it was really, really scary because I've done this kind of thing with oils loads of times. Fine, we can do it with acrylics, and there's some opportunity there to work backwards. But when we do it with the acrylic lacquers like this, being solvent based, I mean, yes, we could always airbrush it out, I guess, but there's a certain finality to it, isn't there? I mean, when you're doing this, any of this kind of work with acrylic lacquers, you want it to go well and you want it to work. So yeah, there we go. There it is, 125 Cowling Color. So next up, I'm arranging my dishes. So that's my space white and that's my space black. And this is the dish that I will probably use from now on for all dark and dark blue tone colors. And I just reactivated it a little bit. It needs to be reasonably thin for the overbrush. And that's the self-leveling lacquer thinner. This actually does hark back. It's a system that's probably a few hundred years old at least, from Japanese style watercolors. Now we don't have to do it exactly the same way. I'm trying to, there we go, some success. Balancing up so that it pools at the bottom in a little bit thinner way. Now this is the wet blending. I'm reactivating the very thin overbrush of the space white and reactivating it with a very thin glaze of the space black. Now please just go back and reference my other one. So the space white, in terms of this property, is the very, very light yellow, almost eggshell. And then what I'm arbitrarily calling space black is a very, very dark blue color. I just thought it would be more interesting. And they work together very nicely. You can see there the self-lacquer. What even is that, Linc? The self-leveling thinner helps to reactivate and smooth over the previous added details of the white color, let's call it space white. And this is why I've gone for a very wide soft brush, because we can also do it. I'll show you this again in the future, I'm sure. But we can go with a thin pointy, but the texture and the effects will be different. It would be much more lining in. And it's not exactly what I wanted to experiment with here. I thought, well, if I'm going to share this for the first time, why don't we go with a method that is quite smoothing? Because I'd imagine I've got to be a little bit careful how I share the Maschinen Krieger look, because I understand there's probably a sweet spot there of tolerance for most people, and how, there we go, wet blend, now back to the white. Now, yes, there's a little bit of paint mixing back and forth, but that's okay. Bobby Ross did it, so we can do it too. And there you go, we're getting that mix of color in between. Now the funny thing is, yes, I'll leave some of that dark blue in the white, and that will be expressed in future paint jobs, and it will look really nifty. How cool is that? See edging there? See how bright, like a highlight effect that leaves? And I know it's insane edging with such a large, crazy brush, but look, it just works. It's probably the best way I could say it. Now see there's some chips. I'm chipping and chipping around the hatch there. It works. Now, some of them may not work, and that's cool. We will then paint them out with, there we go, flick over the dark blue for us, Linc. Show us how we fix this. And there we go. Blend it in. It's real painting. Somehow along the line, we as modelers have been taught that the processes need to be very separate, and it's not actually the case. You know, we can just do the two ovals and paint the owl, draw the owl. It can be a continuous process. So actually, that's a really cool chip that's developing there. Nice work. On the top right there, see underneath the brush, you can see that. Yeah, there's another one. So what I discovered, and what I've done previously in the past a bunch of times, is that as we rework that surface, as it gets wetter with the self-leveling lacquer thinner there, the top layer becomes, is damaged the right word, or could we call it softer? Let's go with that. The uppermost layer becomes softer, and then we can kind of work that to a point where we start removing some of it and or damaging it, which is where something special comes in for us as modelers, sci-fi modelers and painters, is that removing paint is acceptable in our medium, right? Traditional painters, say with oils and on a canvas, they would also do this too. But it kind of feels cool for us because, you know, we've gone so far as to invent a bunch of stuff like putting hairspray on models. I mean, the idea of it is commonplace now and acceptable. Even some of my friends have nicknames for it, like woohoo spray or something. It's hilarious. But you think about it, we're doing what traditional old school painters would do, in that we're then reworking down to underlayers. And that's totally cool and acceptable. So when I'm sharing this kind of work, I'd like to suggest, I'm not saying you have to do it, I'm just a friend who's done a lot of stupid stuff with paint, this friendly suggestion that we can also sometimes think of paint as more of as a continuous process. And that's what I'm showing you here. Now, can you see there? That's more under layer. I'm going all the way back. There's pre-painting there that I was doing with the space white, but also if you go hard enough, you can use the feature of lacquer paints that now I know a bunch of my friends feel that it's a drawback, that you accidentally kind of burn through and reactivate underlayers, because the question I get most is, how do I stop that from happening? But I kind of want to carefully and in a friendly way reply, oh no, that's what we want to happen, it's a feature. And seriously, so as we work backwards and forwards with our colors, and it's very simple palette here. We've just got that white, yellow, the eggshell perhaps, and the very dark blue, black blue, and work it backwards and forwards until we're happy with it. And it's a. I'm hoping this might be a quite liberating experience for you to watch this, because that's how I mean it. It's not a. I know it might sound like it's supposed to be a winner takes all shobu. Gosh, I don't know how to say that one in English. Where it's one of those moves that if it works, you totally win and you get the full point, like in judo. If it doesn't work, then you've totally failed and you're out and you're unconscious on the floor. But no, it didn't need to be like that at all. So this is probably the fourth time coming back and redefining that bottom edge of the suit, because I want to put some effects in there, some burnt effects. And I thought, hey, this could be really nifty. So I've gone space white. Now let's touch it back again with a very thin layer of the dark blue. And it's starting to look really, really interesting. This is just something I could not have produced with my airbrush. I don't have enough skill, and I'm just not sure that it's actually possible. Even with hairspray or the silicone barrier that I sometimes show you, I'm not sure that a varied approach like this is actually even possible, because the minute variations that this back and forth is producing, it's more analog rather than hairspray. Can almost be a little digital, can't it? And I know I'm kind of breaking my metaphors and analogies here, but nice chipping work there, Linc. Sneaky chipping along the way. How cool is that? But with the hairspray, for example, we tend to have paint on, paint off. It's hard to take off less or more at different stages. Yes, we can go multiple coats, but again, isn't that just digital layering? The same with acrylic painting up. Is you start at the bottom layer, you add layers as they dry. We're building up in layers, aren't we? But here, we really are going a little bit back and forth until we feel that it's right. Okay, Uncle Linc, let's get crazy. Let's ramp it up a notch and see how far we can take this sort of thing. So, these epaulets, the shoulder armor, they look good, having taken a beating, so to speak, and can hold a lot of detail, being quite small areas. So here I'm going with the overbrush, the pre-highlight, with the white, some chips, and just I'm thinking ahead in terms of detail, adding detail into the finish here, and I'm going a little bit too hard. Now they could be visually referenced later. Now here I changed brushes because I've gone a lot wetter. See how there's a bunch more thinner in there? So yeah, this is a very thin glaze. So what I started also kind of experimenting here with, working with, is I was laughing because yeah, of course I've done it before. You don't come out and chuck stuff on YouTube that you haven't tried out before, right? So I've loaded up this surface here with a very thin glaze. Now this is, as who've experimented will know, super fast to reactivate our underlayers. And what I'm doing is the thin glaze actually becomes like a reactivating layer, and it smooths the surface. So now, as I touch back into the paint, I'm actually removing the glaze, not only, but also the blue airbrushed layer, and poking through to the white airbrushed layer. And it's very shiny, it's hard to see detail, but it looks amazing because of all the different kinds of depth. Emboldened with my last area of stupidity, my last success of stupidity, we could call it, let's go on to the lid. Now the lid is going to be one of the key focal points of this one, just for the shots that I've got in mind. I want this to be, the snake eye perhaps on the way home from Operation Dark Side of the Moon. So the lid, the helmet, it's going to be quite prominent. So this one, see the brush is a little drier, so I'm going quite a bit harder and layering in some pre-detail effects here. Now again, you could stop at this as well. I think I should point that out. You don't have to do this one. This is, of course, just taking it a little too far. That's my thing. Because I don't know. If I don't experiment with how far I can go with this, how will I ever know? So, get crazy, test it out. We can always repaint it So the other focal point I'm thinking of will be the chest armor here. And just based on the orientation of the suit, I know it's space, so there's no up and down, no one can hear you clean. But, in space, I still want I'm going to photograph the suit at least, mostly vertically, having it positioned as it would if there was gravity. I think you know what I'm getting at there. So I imagine I'd like some lighting effects, again, happening from the lip of the front of the suit and down. My glaze mix is thickened up a little because, it dries off. And here I am reworking. So this is proper, this is wet glazing here, reactivating the underlayers, wet on wet, because the white paint has not dried. So this both activates the white extra stuff that I put on, the airbrush layer, and if on long enough, can go all the way through to that white airbrush layer too. You've just kind of got to be judging it. You've got to be watching what you're doing. I know you're going to ask me for times and try to mathematically engineer it down. I'm so sorry. I'm not that guy. I can't think in those terms. I just watch this and test too how I'm going. So see how when I'm off to a drier area, boom, I just work with much rapidity. So I'm speeding through and doing stuff, and then yeah, it looks pretty nifty, Linc, and then I back off. Okay, so I'm feeling cocky here and coming back, and I'm coming back to the lid. So I'm going to go a little bit harder here. I'm going to go as far as I'm brave enough to test out how this is going to look. So nice bit of edging here. This is where the helmet comes down. As I feel the brush kind of dry, I know I can then point it in and get some more pre-chip effects. And because it's a mix of paints, touching into some of the wetter areas of the blue, it does. So this one, that's a very overbrush, almost, it's close enough to be called, we could almost call it a dry brush, to kind of highlight the edging around the eye slit there. Now, I didn't like it, I'd gone a little bit too hard with the white, so I wet brushed that out immediately with the dark blue, and worked great. Now across the top here, I want some like chip and texture effects that go across. Instead of the longitudinal axis of the helmet, I want them to go across, so almost so perpendicular to the longitudinal axis. That probably has a clever name that I don't know. I'm not smart enough, but I know I know what it wants to be. So painting these in there, yeah, you can see the texture across the helmet. I'd like it to look as if it's kind of bumped into a few things in space, and that could be nifty. Now anytime I need to smooth it, I can use that very thinner blue paint mix and kind of smooth out some of these, so wet blending them back into place. And I was pretty impressed. See there, I need to smooth it, so I'm going a little bit heavier. If ever the white feels a little bit too pronounced, you can wet blend it back like that. It's pretty nifty. It's a nice process. Take your time, just move through it. Pick out where you want to further refine and damage the surface. So here are some more chips. As the brush feels to be drying, I'm pulling chips out of the blue as well. And then when it gets a little too dry, I can add a bit more thinner. Now, here's something. This is a really stupid thing to do, but the effect was amazing. I felt the brush to be dry enough that I'm scraping there across the line of travel of the model, so to speak. And you can see it's pulling out some very authentic and nifty looking scratch marks across the top of the helmet there. And yes, I felt very clever doing this. Looking back, I have terror watching this. But in the moment, it struck me to put them there. And I really liked it, and it's extremely satisfying, actually, to look now back at that finish. That's really cool. I hope you liked it, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and always to our wonderful supporters. Please head on over to paintonplastic.com for more.